a direct spiritual path, a practice. So sometimes, there's many different direct paths, angles, gateways, and sometimes they'll share something that's more, has some separation elements in it, like I'm not this, I'm not that. And I've personally found that I am not this, I'm not that approach to be highly effective, right? But sometimes making these distinctions, it sounds like we're saying, like there's a truth and there's a non-truth, or there's a reality and there's an illusion, or there is a right and a wrong, almost, spiritually speaking, or correct and incorrect. But really just see the separation as a way into unity. And I'll explain a little bit what I mean by that. The thing is, unity is simply the state of existence, the state of life as it is. There's no way around it. There's no way to argue with it. There is only one. So no practice can undo that. You've been conditioned by all the elements that you've associated with for all your life, all the filters, all the objects that you filtered your sense of existence, your sense of being through, that has produced the illusory feeling, or the feeling of the illusion of separation being real. And it doesn't really matter what you do at this point, when this is already the case, when you already feel separation, when you believe in separation, then, it doesn't really matter whether you practice unity or separation. And also it doesn't matter from the point of view of not being able to change the actual structure of reality, which is unity. So you can practice all kinds of separations, seemingly separation-inducing practices, and it wouldn't make any difference in the unity, in the oneness, in the one that this all is appearing as. So ultimately, the absolute one is realized, and greater unity is experienced and felt through, for example, the practice of separating yourself out from everything that you can experience. Right now, this self, let's say true self, they're just words, but let's say the true self, or you can call it mind space, or you can call it awareness, you can call it being, you can call it I am, you can call it that which you are, whatever that is. Right now, that has been infiltrated. It has collapsed itself around form, and form exists within the dream of imagination, within labels, within concepts, within descriptions. It has therefore spatial elements, temporal elements, and because the true self, which is absolute, one, formless, infinite, indescribable, free, freer than space, but in some senses it's like space, but it's even freer than space itself. You are even freer than space itself. That which you are, total unity, has been infiltrated by thoughts, sense perceptions, stories, names, filters, spatial and temporal realities, or dimensional experiences. And you've been associating with those elements for so long that it has become challenging for most of us to kind of, in a sense, keep a quiet, empty, clear mind that is transparent to the natural state of this formless, space-like, but truly ultimately beyond space, existence, awareness, being, self. And so again, you can't really separate anything out from anything. That's just more illusion. So it doesn't really matter. You've lived your whole life in illusion, so don't worry about trying to mimic unity in your spiritual practices when there's very effective spiritual practices, very direct spiritual practices available to you that can actually tangibly, pragmatically give you direct experience of oneness. But the practice sounds like separation. And in many ways, this does mimic politics, like not being able to see past the surface, thinking we choose for unity, but really choosing separation, and thinking that that which brings unity is bringing separation. So it's a little related, but I won't go into that now. I'm enjoying my retreat too much. And so to separate oneself out completely from the entire universe, the entire landscape of experience, the entire realm of consciousness, final separation, ultimate separation, is ironically realization of the absolute infinite unity. So if we take this natural, original, primordial space of what you are, this, for now, let's call it awareness. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's beyond even what we would what we would think of as awareness. But the term does a good job at getting pretty close to infinite reality. Because awareness cannot be found to be anything, right? This is not awareness. This is not awareness. This is not awareness. I can't find it in my brain. It's this intangible, formless, space-like quality of I know, of knowing, pure knowing, of being, knowing, knowing, being, knowing. So you can't put your finger on it, you can't grasp it, you can't catch it, you can't kill it. It endures, it continues. Doesn't matter what appears, it just endures, it continues. Every appearance inseparably appears from it. But again, it has become associated, it has become collapsed, it has blended together with ideas that have appeared within this awareness, you could say, or alongside this, with this awareness. And if we start separating from these concepts one by one, so let's say I'm triggered about something, and I investigate, okay, I'm triggered about the situation, this person said something to me, and it gave me an emotional response, perfectly fine, just accept it. But then investigate, okay, I have this trigger, what must I believe is true? What must I believe I am? What must I have identified and associated with to be offended by vibrations in what appears to be air hitting my eardrum? A person could have said the same thing. If I was deaf, I would not be triggered. The same thing happened, but I did not internalize it. I did not hear it. I did not perceive it. I did not interpret it. I did not give it meaning. I did not pass it through my filters of associating awareness with form, with ideas, with concept. And if I find the concept, and usually it's multi-layered, multifaceted, because we're conditioned in several ways, but I can find things like, oh, I thought I was the body. I'm assuming I've associated with the body, and I've associated with being a personality inside this body, that I have to use this body to represent that personality, that truth that I feel is true. And I have to go out there in the world, and this is who I am. I have associated with this form, spatially, temporally, ideology-wise, thought-wise, belief-wise. And so it makes sense that I'm triggered because awareness, has associated itself with the body. Just one example. And the body is the culprit for most triggers and most experiences that feel personalized. For most of our delusions, the root of it is like the feeling that I am the body, the belief that I'm the body. Now, if we could take this awareness, this beingness, this knowingness, this pure space of knowing, and we could detach it from perceptions, from sensations, from thoughts, from ideas, from memories, so we could actually separate awareness from what it's appearing, what it's seeing, what it's sensing, perceiving, thinking, sense organs, and so forth, then we could have a more direct experience of that awareness. That awareness, in a sense, would be purified. And there are some people that would disagree with me, but I've just found over and over and over again that the spiritual journey is, at the heart of it, it's all about purification, right? It's got a bit of a bad rap in some religious circles, but really it is about purification, because what you are is already complete, all right? And so in a sense, we never ever truly attain anything new. An attainment of something new, in a sense, is a rediscovery. You uncover, you separate the dirt, the filth, the associations out from the truth. You cleanse, you purify. Every time you purify that awareness, every time you separate that awareness from the elements it has become associated with or attached to, or you detach the elements from that awareness purifies itself. And again, the separation thing is just semantics, because you can't separate anything. So don't worry about it. Like, oh, this is a separation practice. We're everything. Yes, you are, but you can't realize that from the point of view of being the body. You just can't. Or the point of view of being a person. You just can't. You got to go beyond. You got to go beyond the mind stuff. And one of the most effective, direct ways, pragmatic ways to do that is to separate yourself from everything. Don't make this into it's not a philosophy. It's not a philosophical stance to take towards life and the people that you meet and the jobs that you do and your duties and honors. It's just a practice. So it's not about thinking in terms of separation. It's about distinguishing, making distinction, clear distinction, discerning between what you are and what you are not. Oh, but aren't we everything? Yes, but if you take the route of I'm not this, and I'm not this, and I'm not this, and I'm not this, you can very quickly, arguably most directly, most fast, realize unity. So separating your true self from your false self is actually a way into unity. Because again, unity is not something that you will create. It's not an experience that you're going to one day have. It's the nature of things. It's the substratum of things, if you will. It's just the isness of things. You can't undo it. It doesn't matter what you think. You can have a million separation thoughts and feelings every single minute for the rest of your life, and it would not put a single change or dent in absolute, infinite, unified, one reality. So it doesn't matter what you do, you see, in terms of spiritual practice. Like, you can't separate. So try to separate that essence, the essential primordial knowingness, that super subtle, ultimately becomes experientially, becomes subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler, and every time you think it's the subtlest, subtler. So if you keep going subtler, you continue to purify. You become subtler, you become pure. Your awareness starts to purify itself. Its lens, its filter is purifying itself, so that perception becomes more and more transparent to the nature of things as they already, always, inevitably, inescapably, changelessly are. So separate your way into unity, spiritually speaking. Again, not a dogmatic belief, not a philosophy, not a relationship advice, just a spiritual direct path practice. Separate yourself from everything. Separate everything out from yourself. And when you hit what's left, okay, and the final stage of this, there's many sort of subtleties within the realm of awareness, within the realm of consciousness. There's many degrees of subtlety, and every time it's more spacious, it's more subtle, it's more indescribable. It has less and less to do with space and time and people and relationships and thoughts and conventional reality. The relationship to conventional reality seems to be less and less bridgeable. It's like inexpressible. It's got nothing to do with conventional ways of relating and believing in reality. This is why spiritual practice needs to be taken at your own pace, and deconstructing and separating these false elements out and making contact with those truer levels of your being, those more transparent levels, closer to the truth. Has to be done at your own pacing, but I suggest you do it. You meditate, you try this out. But it becomes less and less conventional, so you become less and less human. Actually, experientially, less and less human. Without suppressing anything, without avoiding anything, without denying anything, without not being willing to acknowledge anything. Nevertheless, your knowledge of yourself, your direct experience of isness, of life, of existence, of being, of truth, becomes so refined, so subtle, that it's like two completely different worlds. Again, the separation element there, the apparent separation element. Because more and more your experience is that conventional reality doesn't really have any existence. All that's real is the state of awareness itself. And it has many states and flavors and changes and nuances and ways in which it can experience itself, and filters and subtleties and levels up to a certain point. The highest level has no levels. Ironically, it's the highest level, but it has no levels because it's the one in its most primordial, original, absolute, stateless state. And you can get there by separating yourself out in your spiritual inquiry, your meditation, your contemplation, from everything that you can perceive. What typically happens initially when we start to inquire and we realize that, oh, I'm not this perception, I'm also not this perception, I'm also not this thought, I am also not this emotion. I have the emotion, nothing wrong with it, but it's not what I am. It's just what appears. It's just part of the canvas of life. Again, totally allowed, totally accepted, nothing to push it. We don't have to push anything away for spiritual practice. Separating yourself has nothing to do with not experiencing certain things. So you can have a raging emotional state. You can have a raging trigger come up and still separate yourself from that trigger without denying the trigger. So actually, by separating yourself from the trigger, you can allow the trigger to be as it is. So it's also a more holistic path in most ways, even though it sounds to the service-minded people like a practice of separation, like a philosophy of separation. It's not. Look beyond the service of separation, both in politics and in spiritual practice, and your thoughts and your emotions and your perceptions.